Self-reg is about understanding stress across 5 domains. Those are the 5 domains we just went through in the last video, and about learning to manage energy and tension. And the 5 practices of self-reg are the way we do that. Before I introduce you to the 5 practices, I want to emphasize a point. Self-reg is not a program. It's a practice. It's actually a way of being, a way of viewing the world. It involves a lot of reflective practice. It involves taking our own expertise as educators and human beings and applying them to our context to see differently. So these 5 practices are really helpful for implementing this social emotional learning strand. The first of the 5 practices is reframe. Reframe the behavior. We reframe behavior that we see in children, in ourselves, in others, and it's a helpful tool. It's a way of shifting from seeing it just from one angle to beginning to understand why and why now and what more might be going on. It really applies to this strand, the social emotional learning strand. So I see very worthy goals. Identify and manage emotions, maintain positive motivation and perseverance, build relationships and communicate effectively, develop self-confidence, think critically and creatively. So I've named almost everything on that strand. I've missed a couple on purpose because they fall really directly into the self-reg 5 practices, and I think that can be useful here. All of those areas are really important. I want those for my daughter. I want those for every student. I wish you classrooms full of students that are showing those qualities, those characteristics. We're not seeing that. Sometimes we do, and we want to be really careful to not group all children into one group, because many are thriving, and many in Ontario are thriving, and many are thriving in math. What do we do when they aren't? What do we do when they're not motivated? We could slip back into a self-control approach, which is, we could try sort of carrot on the stick stuff. We could try the competition approach, trying to get kids to keep up with other kids, but that doesn't really work. Right? And if it does work for a little moment in time, if we can push a student to stick with something after they've shown us that it's outside of their window of tolerance, that's the key. So it's not suggesting self-reg is about not facing challenges, not allowing for struggle. That's actually a really important part of growth. When it's outside of the window of tolerance, what do we do? Right? So very first step is reframing the behavior. Just as one example, if we were to unpack a lack of motivation, which we've done in our work, and we'll share that with you down the road, or you can certainly look up some of the links that go with this. A lack of motivation can actually be a sign of a dysregulated stress response system. So underpinning brain and body, not just in the brain, but physiologically in the brain and body. Just think about a time that you have been totally depleted. Maybe you didn't sleep the night before, maybe it's been going on for months and there's things that you're worried about or taking care of in your world. And then you go in to teach. Are you your best self as you're teaching? No, well, how could you be? You're depleted, you're probably eating, less well because of that, and all of these things are compounding. So that's what it's about. It's about reframing and recognizing there's more beneath it, okay? So the very first thing is seeing something differently. Seeing these behaviors, seeing the child that's throwing down their pencil, that's refusing to work, that's not coming to school, that's head down in the hoodie, that's bursting out or in tears or mad. All of these are signs to reframe. Then we go to practice 2, which is recognize the stressors. I talked to you about that in the last video a little bit, but just remember there's those 5 domains. And what's key here is that you don't just look at the obvious ones. We can't just get stuck in, well, they didn't get a good night's sleep last night and they came to school without a healthy breakfast. Those are part of it. That school itself has many stressors that students are experiencing, and there's individual differences. There is always more to understand. You're looking for the little hidden ones as you recognize the stressors, and you can look across all 5 domains and begin to think about what more is there to understand. Reduce the stress. This is what you might find on an IEP. Anytime you add an accommodation or you try to dial down tension in some way, or you add a strategy that's meant to help cope. So this is a really important area. We do it for ourselves as educators, because remember, your stress matters. In the balance, you cannot lend calm if you are not calm. So what are some of the stressors that we can reduce? So that's step 2 and step 3. And there is a profile tool. We have resources with the Self-Reg Schools Handbook that you can use to begin to build your own profiles, and you can certainly do those with kids themselves as well. Practice number 4 is really interesting because it is in the strand from the math curriculum. And where I see it in there is number 5, develop self-awareness. Develop self-awareness, stress awareness. And we could say, are you calm? Yes, I'm calm. Kids don't know. So many kids don't realize when they're calm at all. And what they have, the anxiety, can well up inside. And what you're looking at is quiet. But you see something burst. If you were to look inside a child, I often talk about the idea of the Fitbit of the future that we could see inside a child. And would we see a stress storm of such going on inside? And how would we see that differently? So we're beginning to become aware, and it's not just in the moment. It's actually very hard to be aware when you're in the moment. Think of one when you haven't handled things great. You know, maybe you've been wonderful all day long for everybody in your school, all the kids that you're supporting, and then you're a little snippy. You go home or with your own family. Why? Because you don't care? No, of course you care. These are all signs of just being overstressed and not recognizing it in advance. It's a very proactive process, trying to get it upstream as much as you can. I like to think of it as a sneeze. Recognize when it's coming on. We also need stress awareness around when we're in our just right place. Sometimes we'll be really focused and we're in our flow and it's wonderful, but we miss the cues our body is sending us that we needed a little break. You know, you can do little things in your chair, a little bit of movement. Sometimes just taking a moment to go, right? These are all part of stress awareness. And practice number 5, really it's about restoring. So we respond, these are strategies for resilience and restoration. But I want you in this particular area to recognize that you're seeing these signs of really struggling when it comes to math. It can't always be just about coping. It has to be about filling up that tank for the longer term, for the longer vision, doing things, laughing, a little bit of laughter, I love that the curriculum talked about the joy of math. You can be infectious and pass that on. Taking a moment to take a little break before you dive into something. About to write a big test, how do you prepare for that in advance is part of it. But also some of the things that can pass on to students, recognizing that we're trying to stay in balanced states, we're trying to recognize them, which is practice number 4. We're also trying to recognize those sources of stress, which is also in the strands, and knowing what to do about them. But this is about joy, it's about enjoying the math, it's about feeling confident as the learner, and knowing what to do when we're getting off track and how to get ourselves back in balance. So the 5 practices are a terrific tool, a terrific point of entry for any educator teaching math grade 1 to 8. If you are lucky enough to have students all day long or a good portion of their day, really put some emphasis on that practice number 5, the restoring, the part that comes after the energy expenditure or before the energy expenditure of learning. You're looking for that attention and that focus. If you only have them, you're teaching grade 7 and you only have them for a math class, well, how do you start your math class? What do you do at the midpoint? How do you finish it? All of those moments in time can actually be a lived practice of the 5 practices of self-reg.